welcome back to the class, everyone. Thanks to the Lightspeed bundles, a lot of people have been able to take great advantage of their Supreme Leader Kylo Ren farms, and a lot of you who have done this didn't really even have First Order going that much to begin with. So what I want to take a look at today is not only how to mod SWGOH, but how do you mod First Order? So we are going to be doing this in a very similar fashion to how we did it for the Resistance and or the Rey team, where I'm not going to just go down the line of every character, and I am going to kind of do that in a way, but I want to talk about priority. When we get these new characters, especially when we get them so quickly, a lot of times we don't have just a huge plethora of mods out there to apply to them and just call it a day and be done. We have to kind of pick and choose who gets the really good mods, who gets the okay mods, and then who gets whatever's left over. So that is kind of the design for today, and as previously mentioned in one of our last videos, when you're going to make compositions with SWGOH, we already kind of dove into that. I'll put a link to that in the description below. So if you're wondering, what is this modding trying to accomplish against what teams defensively or offensively, you're going to want to check that video out because we jump into a lot more actual practical teams there. This is going to be pretty strictly on modding. So when we jump into First Order and or Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, however you want to label this, the most important character to have modded correctly, and this probably isn't that big of a surprise, is Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. And to understand this, you really have to understand both him and Rey's position when they came out as characters in or Galactic Legends of the game. They were just completely busted compared to anything else we had, and quite frankly, they could just solo a lot of the actual teams at the time, and even a lot of teams today they have the ability to take on their own. So their modding has become intensely important because Supreme Leader Kylo specifically, when you look at all the counters that he's a part of, all of his allies are either meant to or can die, and he just goes in and eventually will stack up enough mastery with how the whole of his kit and just start slaughtering the enemy. He also has really good health steal, naturally, as well as armor pen. So he just has all the tools he needs that, as long as you have him modded very well, he can take out just about anything, specifically in 3v3 and a lot of things in 5v5. So I will say this right at the beginning. I know many of you are probably looking at me and like, okay, why do you have full health sets on SWGOH? And there's one thing that I kind of need to set straight. While there are plenty of ways to mod Kylo poorly, there are a few different ways to mod him well. And the three main stats that you want to look at when modding him well are offense, health, and speed. If you go in any of those three directions, and even if you go in any of those three directions and kind of mix and match a little bit, you're gonna have a good Kylo by the end of it that should be able to do everything that Kylo is supposed to do. I've seen a lot of people just completely max out speed with getting on the secondaries and a speed set and a speed arrow, and they get like a health primary here, a health primary here, and a crit damage primary here. That's all great. That is one way to do it. I've seen people who completely max the offense out with an offense set, an offense primary here, an offense primary here, pretty good speed secondaries, and then a crit damage triangle here. Those are all acceptable forms of doing it. They do come with different nuances, and we're not going to really touch on all those today. But for example, a full offense Kylo, when going against Rey, is going to either kill characters immediately right off the bat and or trigger damage immunity, which will trigger whirlwinds. So there's a little bit of nuances. Whatever modding you choose to go with, just try to get used to it. Understand what are going to be your limitations, what are you going to do specifically well against. And I will talk a little bit about my specific modding, which is just full health. Again, this is not the only way to do it. You could do full health with a crit damage triangle. You could do full health primaries, which I have with an offense set. There's a few different ways to cut it. Really what we're trying to say is stay away from useless stats for him like tenacity or potency or even crit chance. Crit chance is a big one that a lot of people assume SWGOH needs. Dude does not need crit chance. Number one, 120% without adding really any, and then on top of that, he just lives with advantage, so he should be critting without any issue. That's really a wasted mod set. You're much better off with just a generic health secondary set. The reason why we have full health, and what I mean by full health, is we have 3 health sets, so he gets all these 10% bonuses 3 times over. We have the 16% health here, 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 here. We have a decent amount of speed. I really do not have that much offense on him. And the reason why, and I think this is a little hard for people to understand because mastery is not something that is very easily understood, is that SWGOH's mastery is crit damage and offense. And what this ends up meaning in the long run, you can kind of see that here, mastery increases critical chance, crit damage, and damage, which is another way of saying offense within itself, is he has unlimited stacking mastery that can get so large. And what essentially this means is, as long as he survives, his damage, whatever modding offense you can do on him, will be immediately dwarfed by what this can do after about his second ult. And again, there are advantages to offense modding if you're trying to kill something right out the gate, or you're just used to it, or something like that. But with how this works, and I won't get into the whole nitty gritty of his kit, but SLKR, the whole reason that he could beat back in the day the Sith Triumphant Raid is because if you left him alone for long enough, his mastery would skyrocket and he would just start dealing millions of damage. Without exaggeration, he was doing millions of damage. And you can even get that a little bit in PvP. Again, after you have approached your second ult, you've doubled your siphon amounts, and then you've stolen maybe you haven't even stolen the master because you're up against Galactic Legend, but you've gained enough mastery to be able to be bolstered yourself. And one of the important things to understand about that is your modding doesn't directly affect your mastery. What I mean by that is SLKR doesn't get more offense gains based off his modding. He gets the modding, he does get that, but he doesn't get more increased because of it. His mastery is a stagnant, separate thing that will increase on its own without really being affected by how much offense is coming from that. So mod your SLKR correctly, regardless of what you want to do. If you want to do the whole health build, you want to do the whole speed build, whole offense, or a mix of the three, they're all correct. Just pick what's right for you. So now the next first order characters that their modding is important, how you mod them can change the outcome of battle, are going to be these four. And they aren't as quite intensive as SLKR, and they're also simpler. So Kylo here, it's pretty average tank. He wants defense sets, though those are the best for him typically. There is the exception if you are fighting a lot of people that are using Jedi Knight Luke to counter SLKR, then you're going to want health sets just because there's a lot of true damage dealt to tanks. The defense immediately goes away. That's a really one kind of point scenario that isn't that it isn't really that relevant for me. So I just put defense sense on him. He has very good armor, so that helps a lot there. And then same concept as SLKR, actually, we want to have health primaries. Health primaries have a really good bang for your buck. And again, when a tank gets them, it's very beneficial. And then on top of that, he does have a lot of ways to regenerate his health, both under his unique as well as his lead, if you end up using that in some type of 3v3 scenario. So speed is not of the utmost importance on him as far as secondaries go. If you can average about a 15 on him, that's fine. You can see I have a 12 here, which is kind of bad. But if you go over to my circle, it evens out pretty quick with the 22. I have a 16 here. I have a 11 speed here. Speed, I mean, you want him to kind of take a turn to get his 2-turn stun off, but at the end of the day, he's a tank with, under SLKR, a very, very consistent taunt. Every single time he gets advantage, he's going to taunt, and he gets advantage constantly with just how first order in general work. So if you get us, again, health primaries on all four of these, defense sets, and then a decent amount of speed. And I guess any, extra defense percent, flat, whatever that you can get into secondaries too, that is a nice bonus. But for the most part, defense sets, health primaries make him really hard to kill. Next up is going to be our good friend Hux. And Hux is one of the few characters in the game that actually has a really high tenacity, which means if we throw more onto that with a set and a cross primary, we can make it difficult for a lot of actually really relevant counters out there with an AoE ability block to be able to ability block him and keep him from doing all the things that he wants to do. And Hux has some pretty important abilities, not just on his own team, but again with Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. He can pass turns, refresh his cooldowns, as well as use a Mass Assist and a Dispel. You want him to be able to use his specials. And I don't even have him modded as I would like to, or as well as I would like to. In reality, in a perfect world, this would be a Tenacity primary here, along with my Tenacity set, that would pump him up to somewhere around 150%, which would be enough to resist a lot of the ability blocks out there. And then on top of that, you do want him to be really stinking fast. He is a character that would benefit from 20s or more. I tried not to slack on him, and I realize a lot of people can't do that. Do what you can within your budget. He probably shouldn't take precedence over a character like Mara Jade or Echo that the counter really lives or dies on whether or not they go first. Hux benefits from going first. Most counters aren't entirely contingent on it, but again, like I put quite a bit of an investment into him. I've got 25s, I've got a 23, I've got a 21. Do what you can, what's right for your roster, but know that the guy wants to have speed. He wants to be able to not only go first, and he'll have a little bit of an added bonus to that with how Kylo's kit works, but he wants to cycle through his turns as much as he can, not just through turn mirror, but through speed naturally. Next up is going to be our good friend Lobster, or Red, or Sith Trooper, whatever you want to call him. And he is actually, I will admit, one of the harder characters to understand their modding, because it just, when you look at him, you're thinking, oh, crit damage, first order character, attacker, crit damage. And I would want to challenge that a little bit because he's getting so much crit damage from his kit and from leaderships or other uniques out there like the first order TIE Pilot Omicron. You really want to focus on offense. You already have a ton of crit damage in your modifier. We need to work in modding through his base on offense. So offense primary here, offense primary here, and I even have an offense primary on his triangle. I will say the optimal, if you're really wanting to talk about perfection, the optimal triangle would be a crit damage triangle with a 5% or more offense secondary on it. I don't have that, or if I do, it can't really go to him. So he just gets stuck with the offense primary. But this is still fairly decent. You want him to have as high as offense as possible. Even your other mods on him should probably have a good offense secondary like this one. Speed isn't as much of an important factor on him. You do want to take a turn every now and then so that he can cleanse if you're not using him on a team with SLKR. But ultimately, he's going to be attacking out a turn every single time there's a crit, and that's where most of his stuff comes from. And I will say, and this is a little bit contrary to most of first order characters, Sith Trooper does want crit chance. We talked about SLKR before having a bunch of natural crit chance. Sith Trooper, not only does he not have a really good base for crit chance itself, but he's one of the only first order characters that is going to be constantly using up his advantage. If you're in a 5v5 team and every single one of your characters is critting because they have advantage, Sith Trooper doesn't regain advantage every single turn. He is actually going to have to rely on his own base crit chance to be able to make those hits and to make them really big, because as previously mentioned, crit damage is one of the things that first order uses the most, and that's how he gets the most boosted. So you do want crit chance on him. A crit chance set is definitely very good. Even if you're a lower relic, crit chance primary here might be excusable. Crit chance on the secondaries is also a really good idea. 80%, it's good. The closer you can get to 100 is better, because crit avoidance does exist out there. And yeah, wow, I have a lot of crit chance and he's still pretty low. So do as best you can there, but offense, crit chance, I guess that's probably a pretty standard attacker. And last, and I guess kind of least, is first order stormtrooper. I actually really like the kit. One of the cool things he does, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but he can call another first order random ally to assist, and sometimes it's SLKR, and that's really funny because SLKR does a lot of damage on his basic. But overall, it's a very simple tank kit. He wants protection primaries, and then in an ideal world, he would have full defense. I don't have that, so he gets a mixture of health and defense. His speed does not matter nearly as much as Cruise because he doesn't have a 2-turn stun that he needs to be able to get. He just needs to taunt, and again, the comps that he's in, they have good ways of making him do that already, so just make him as tanky as possible. Protection and defense is the name of the game. The next group of characters, these characters aren't bad, they're just not really mod intensive. You want them to have decent mods. You don't want to just, throw whatever on them. Be somewhat intentional here. But for the most part, they're going to perform the same regardless. The big exception to this is if you have Phasmocron, talk to your guilds about how they want you to mod him, because Phasmocron, how some people use him or use her, she can be super slow because she gets a ton of turn meter from her leadership within Territory Wars. There are other strategies out there that actually do require her to be faster to be able to take down certain comps. So ultimately, if you have her Kron and your guild wants to use her, that's an officer question. But for the most part, like, she benefits from potency and speed. She likes to take turns so that she can give more turns. She gets a ton of turn meter as it is, so it's a really big, strong give and take about how much she actually needs. And ultimately, outside of Territory Wars, just give her whatever. I mean, a speed set would probably be nice. I have potency on. I like defense down on her basic. There's going to be a general mess sentiment for myself for most of these characters. Xylo, again, he's kind of a mixed bag. Yes, he does benefit from defense and offense. He also likes speed so that he can give more turn meter to the rest of his team. But at the same time, if you're fighting the right team that has a lot of debuffs, he is naturally going to get a ton of speed from his unique. There's also a bunch of turn meter gains out there. So, I mean, don't mod him for tenacity, I guess is what I would say. He benefits a little bit from everything. He doesn't hate potency. He doesn't hate crit damage, because even his attack that can't crit has damage scaled off of crit damage, so it's kind of a weird cheat code in a way. But yeah, make him hit hard or make him fast, kind of do what you want there. First order TIE Pilot, and probably a little bit more important than the other two we previously touched on. If you have his Omicron, his modding does become a little more important. I do like a little bit of survivability on him with a defense set and maybe a protection primary too. And the reason why is because our good friend here's Omicron is a unique ability, which, in other words, if he dies, all this is gone. Your 50% max health, your 100 speed with advantage, your foresight, all the stuff that is contained in this unique, the second he's dead, it's gone. And sure, you want your tanks to be able to kind of hold up the front for the most part, but at the same time, he shouldn't be dying to AoEs. Other than that, I do have modded with an offense set, and I believe we have an offense primary down here. Again, like Lobster, he's a character that benefits from offense because he gets a lot of crit damage from outside sources. That's a good way to boost it. He doesn't hate speed either. A little bit higher priority than probably the other two. And next we have our good friend First Order Officer. I mean, give him speed and potency to best you can. He's not a high priority. I mean, he gives turn meter, he takes turn meter. He's all right. Next up is First Order Executioner. I have a love-hate and hate thing going on with First Order Executioner and his mods, specifically because I love the character. It's very cool. Sad news is I never use him with the way my roster is ordered right now. He benefits highly from health and offense just because he's an attacker with scaling health, and that scaling health is then converted into offense for him to use. So he benefits from a lot of the crit damage. Triangle is very nice on him. If you have a good health arrow, like a health primary arrow, I use speed. I probably shouldn't. He gains turn meter. And then like this is just terrible. Like, don't do this. Tenacity is not the stat he wants. A health primary or an offense primary are probably both excusable, but this is where I've kind of gotten with him, where I just don't use the character enough because mostly not because he's bad, but because my roster is so large that the team just doesn't end up getting used that much. But you do want to have decent mods if you are using them. And last and very much least is going to be, we call this guy Alphabet, because if he were to have an acronym, it would be FOSTP. Yeah, he's a pilot. Ship's pretty good. Put mods on him. If you have bad 6E mods, put those on him so that he gets even more stats. Doesn't really matter what they do. I can't remember. I think I've used this character on the ground once. Didn't have him geared before I get SLKR. I guess I have crit avoidance on him. That's probably not ideal. In fact, it's probably bad, but it doesn't matter because really, no matter how you split your First Order teams in 5v5 or 3v3, he just doesn't get time in the sun. Like, there's a lot of excuses to swap all these characters in the top out of the 1 or 2 teams that you're using. First Order, I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there in the comments that'll let us know the use they use him for, but for the most part, he just ain't doing a whole lot. His ship's pretty good, but the character's there. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Until next time, stay awesome.